Hey, what is up, YouTube? It is your girl Miranda here, and I've got a special video for y'all today. This is your first time here, welcome. I'm clearly not set up to be a video essay channel. I mostly play video games and talk about how foul my farts are. YouTube never even sent me the standard issue trans backdrop and lighting, so thanks so much for tolerating my very amateurish production values. So as you can probably tell from the title of this video, this is about my trans egg cracking experiences. So I first learned about this concept a few months ago, and it's been a worm in my brain ever since. I've been wanting to make this video for a while now, so here we are. So for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, egg cracking is a metaphor for realizing that you're trans. Being an egg is being in a state of denial, and having your egg cracked is like being born for the second time as your true self. So all sorts of different experiences can lead to having your egg cracked. So in my case, I was in deep denial about being trans for decades. I was 38 years old when I finally realized what I was. You could say that I had one of those like Giga Chad ostrich eggs with a shell made of adamantium. I needed serious power tools to crack that sucker. So join me for a trip down memory lane as I talk about some of the experiences I've had in my life that weakened my shell to the point where it was possible to crack it. I was a big bookworm as a kid, and I was an avid reader of science fiction. One book in particular that I adored is Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials. I kept seeing ads for it in comic books and stuff like that, and eventually got myself a copy, which I actually still have. This is actually the second printing in the early 80s, and I love this book. I've had it for like years since I was a kid. Look at it. Look at all these look at these beautiful illustrations. Look how cool these different aliens look. This is from Hospital Station, the Sinris, and you get like descriptions. And this is Gumby. Oh my god! Some of them are really goofy. Oh, this one looks pretty dope. There's one in here that just makes me laugh. Oh my god, there he is! Look at him! Ah! It's like a bear man. It's got plaid pants. Oh, look at me! Look at me! I got plaid pants and a battle axe. Oh my god! This is the Spice Navigators, the Guild Steersman. So maybe we'll get to see that in a Dune film coming soon. This one's actually really cool. This is actually one of the inspirations for Alien. It's from the Voyage of the Space Beagle by A.E. Van Vogt. Oh yeah. This is the old ones from Lovecraft. So this is from At the Mountains of Madness. So this is what kind of depiction of what the old ones look like. There's just so many different ones. This is another one from the Voyage of the Space Beagle. So this is from the Known Space Universe from Larry Niven. Oh yeah, Overlord. So this is from Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. But yeah, this is Barlow's Guide. It's one of my favorite books that I have in my collection. Oh, I just ruined it. I'd imagine myself meeting these aliens and how those encounters would go. Would we be friends? What are their lives like? How would I be changed by the experience? So there's one in particular that always stuck with me, and that's the Dextrin from The Right Hand of Dextra by David L. Lake. So I've never actually read this story, and I don't know what it's about, but the Dextrin does have an ability I found fascinating. So quoting the text, Dextrins have a profound knowledge of chemistry and biology and are able to change the form of other living beings by processing them with their mutagenic chemicals and telekinetic powers. So you can probably guess where this is going. Yeah, I imagine myself meeting a Dextrin and having it change me into a girl. So that's going to be a common theme going forward, and it's really a testament to how like thick-headed I am, that I had this many "oh, I wish I was a girl" moments before I finally realized that I was trans.
Take an egg, correct?
Now, this is probably the least surprising entry on this list to anyone with even a passing familiarity with anime. I was a huge weeb in my teens and early 20s, and even though I was never a Ranma superfan, the premise definitely stuck with me all these years. For those of you that don't know, it follows a group of characters that are cursed to change form whenever they come in contact with cold water, and then they change back with hot water. So most of the characters in the show turn into some kind of animal. So one of the characters turns into a panda, for instance. But our protagonist, Ranma Saotome, instead turns into a girl. Now he spends most of the series complaining about his condition and trying to rid himself of his curse. Now I never really thought about it until I started writing the script for this, that this is probably how your typical cisgender person would react in that situation. Certainly not how I would have reacted, even as a young teen. I distinctly remember wishing that I had this so-called curse, and was often perplexed as to why Ranma reacted so negatively to it, assuming it was just kind of like, some kind of dude bro energy that sees anything feminine as like weak and undesirable. Now that I have a better understanding of what I am, of course Ranma reacts this way. If I was to get this curse now, changing back into a man whenever I get splashed with cold water, I'd have a very visceral reaction, and I would also go to any means necessary to rid myself of it. Now, anime is hardly the only medium that plays around with the gender bending trope. That brings me to my next side-cracking entry, literally named Gender Bender, a Season 1 Freak of the Week episode from The X-Files. So it's hard to overstate the cultural impact of that show at the time. It was the Game of Thrones of the mid-90s. Gender Bender features the Kindred. It's like an Amish community where the members have the ability to transform back and forth between male and female forms. So here we are with so-called sex changing in primetime television viewed by millions. And while it's mostly played for shock value, I was so intrigued by this episode that I'm still thinking about it nearly 30 years later. And you guessed it, 12-year-old me sure as fuck wanted to have the Kindred's abilities. Well, the sex-changing part anyway, not so much their abilities to seduce and murder people. Another anime from my teenage years that stuck with me is a lesser-known one. It's called El Hazard. The basic premise is that 3 high school students, along with one of their teachers, get magically transported to a fantasy-type world where each of them gain a specific superpower. I have a great deal of fondness for the first OVA, and this is one of the only anime where I actually prefer the English dub. The series it's so funny. There's a lot of great gags. The voice acting is wonderful, particularly the voices of Mr. Fujisawa and Katsuhiko Genai. Unlike Ranma, gender bending isn't a focus of the series. The reason I bring it up is that there is a subplot involving the main character having to change their gender presentation from male to female. When our protagonist, Makoto Mizuhara, arrives in the world of El Hazard, it's soon discovered that he's a dead ringer for the missing Princess Vitora. So he's asked to impersonate her in order to keep her disappearance a secret, which he reluctantly agrees to. I've heard more than once from other trans folks that growing up, they frequently tried to get themselves into situations where they'd be forced into dressing into a gender other than the one they were assigned at birth. When I was really young, I remember a couple situations like that. I reluctantly let my sister do my makeup. I'd pretend I'd have to be convinced to play a girl in a school play. And the desire to present as female was always there. But even as a child, I knew it was, wrong. So there would have to be like contrived circumstances, such as being forced into it or doing it for some acceptable purpose in order for it to be accepted. And the older I got, the more embedded I got into very male-dominated social groups with not so great attitudes towards women and queer folks, mind you. And so the more I got into these groups, the more I hid these feelings and got more careful with never letting anyone suspect that I had them. And I pushed those feelings so far down that by the time when I was an adult, I almost forgot they were there. Now, in the case of El Hazard, I wanted so badly to be in the situation that Makoto was in. It was the perfect excuse to dress and act like a girl. I could be a little princess and no one would ever judge me. After all, I was making a sacrifice for the good of the kingdom. No one would ever have to know that this is what I wanted all along. Another example of a male character being forced into presenting female that I distinctly remember from this period of my life is the game Final Fantasy VII. So if you're familiar with this like little known niche game, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Jokes aside, this was a huge deal when it came out. There was only one kid in my group of friends slash associates that had the game, and we would all go to his house after school to watch him play. Kind of like a in-person offline Twitch, if you think about it. There is a part early in the game where one of your companions, Tifa, gets captured by Don Corneo. It's like this mafia Harvey Weinstein type. His cronies bring him women every night, from which he selects his nightly bride, Tifa being one of the candidates. Yeah, it's fucked up, I know. Our main character, Cloud, and his friend Aerith need to make sure they get selected as the other two finalists in order to gain access to Corneo and save Tifa. And you guessed it, this means that Cloud needs to look like a girl for this scheme to work. So you need to go around the village collecting items like a pretty dress and makeup and even underwear to complete the disguise. And can I just say, Girl Cloud is really cute. So just like in El Hazard, it's a contrived situation that allows me to present as female without feeling like I'm being judged or like I'm doing something wrong. After all, I'm doing it to rescue my friend. Surely that's justified. And again, no one would have to know that this is what I wanted. I spent a lot of time as a teen hanging out in arcades playing various fighting games, one of which was Vampire Savior, a game that pits various classic horror movie tropes against each other. So you have like Dracula versus Frankenstein, the Wolfman versus a zombie, you got a Chinese ghost versus a mummy. So my chosen character was Dimitri. He's your basic like gothic vampire type, and he had a move called Midnight Bliss. And what it does is it temporarily transforms a male opponent into a female. And I guess it transforms female opponents into cutesier versions of themselves. Anyways, nothing super profound here. Obviously, this tickled my trans brain, so here's a little fun highlight reel. This one is a bit different in that it's not about how some piece of media affected me. This is about a real life experience in meat space. So in my first year in university, well, the first time I went to university anyways, I went to university a couple times. So a 17-year-old weeb me needed an art credit and signed up for a Japanese language class. And if you're thinking it's like, wow, that seems really young to start university, then I agree. It is young. I'm one of those like gifted child Doogie Howser types turned adult burnout. So yeah, I don't recommend it. Anyways, I distinctly remember one day in Japanese class, we were learning the words for man and woman, otoko and onna. It was one of those classrooms where all the students sit in this like big semicircle with the teacher in the middle. So the teacher had us go around the circle answering a question. If you could live your life again from the beginning, would you choose to be a man or a woman? Or, something to that effect. So the intended purpose was for everyone to say their current gender. Because cisgender people in general don't question their gender, nor do they have the desire to be any gender than the one they were assigned at birth. That's a concept that was completely alien to me and was actually a big revelation to me much later in life. So all the students are going around saying their current gender, otoko, otoko, onna, otoko, onna, onna, and so on. So when it got to be my turn, I said onna, and pretty confidently at that, mind you. So my thinking at the time, it's like, well, I've already lived as a man. Doing it again seems boring. Why not, live a different life? The entire class turned to look at me as if I just like proclaimed that the earth was flat or something like that. The teacher, in fact, assumed that I'd made a mistake and I gotten the words mixed up, and she asked me to answer again. And I said, "Oh, nah. Are you sure?" And at this point, I'm feeling the stares everywhere in the classroom and starting to feel really embarrassed. And I just kind of slink back into my chair and I just say, "Otoko." So looking back, this seems like a pretty obvious litmus test to see who's very likely to be trans. And I still think about this sometimes. And I think if a single person back then had gone up to me and told me, "Hey, like, you might actually be trans," my life would have turned out very differently. I honestly don't even know. I didn't even know what a trans person was back then. I mean, I knew I was different. I didn't know how. I didn't understand how. I didn't have the language to describe it. I couldn't articulate how I felt. And yeah, if a single person had told me. Lastly, we're going to jump forward in time. My egg so far has withstood several attempts to crack it. I went through my 20s living as a man in complete deep denial about what I was. I was miserable and I hated my body and I never understood why. And I still thought about what it would be like to be a woman from time to time, but I was just kind of dismissed it as a persistent fantasy from my teenage years and just not something to be taken seriously. And speaking of not taking things seriously, there is a little series of games known as Saints Row, a completely over-the-top ridiculous parody of the Grand Theft Auto games. These games are fun as shit and they are laugh-out-loud funny. Now, unlike Grand Theft Auto, you don't play a specific character. You have full control over your character's appearance. And not only that, you can change your character's appearance at almost any time. That's going to be important in a second. So I jumped into the series with Saints Row 3. And like every game where you can customize your character, I put myself or an idealized version of myself into the game, which means I'm some version of a fat bearded dude most of the time. So here I am, I'm playing through the missions, I'm collecting in-game currency to spend on things like clothes, and I find myself buying women's clothes to try them out. It turns out, when I'm given 100% freedom to change my appearance, I somehow always gravitate to a feminine presentation. And it started with just the clothes, but the body didn't quite match. And the game has like this surgery center where you can change absolutely anything about your character, including their sex. And sure enough, my character that started out as male ended up female by the end of my playthrough. And this happened not once, but twice. I did the exact same thing with Saints Row 4. I started out as a male character and I ended up female by the end. So let's pause and think about that for a second. My player insert character, when given absolute freedom to change anything about their body or presentation, chose a female body and a female presentation twice. I was 33 years old when I finished Saints Row 4. I was just starting grad school and was living with my overly religious parents. So it was really not the best time or environment to be exploring my gender identity, even if I was consciously aware of what was happening, which I wasn't. But the cracks were starting to show. My GigaChad ostrich egg was showing signs of fatigue. It would be another 5 years before my egg finally cracked. But that's a story for another time. Thank you so much for watching. Those were some of my trans egg cracking experiences, but I'd love to hear about yours in the comments. This was my first video like this, and I had a lot of fun putting it together. So if you enjoyed it, consider sharing it or maybe hitting that subscribe button. And if you're new here and you want to see some fun video game videos, I suggest you check out this one where I gush over my favorite transgender character, or perhaps this one where I fight a Godzilla-sized turkey. Take care, everyone. See you in the next video. Okay, bye-bye.